what really happens in the dhikr is the conditioning, the training of the heart, and the benefits of this, the immediate benefits of this, is the bringing of the barakat that gives you certainty. And uncertainty is something you can feel, you can measure, because it is something that alters the way in which you, when you start tasting this, then you become aware of it, and then you want more of it. And like in every journey, the most important thing is in the beginning. Is how do you start this process, and then you just carry on. The starting is often difficult for people because they don't know what to expect, and that's why it's a good advice to tell the people to be patient and to be courageous too, without expectations, without the longing, without the niyat and the longing, especially the longing, the himma, is this thing doesn't happen. And the Shaykh used to say to us, himma, himma. And when somebody was not on the spot, he would say himma. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about today is something quite, you probably heard of it, but you've never seen the book, I'm sure. You know which book is this? This is Tahafut al Tahafut. Ibn Rushd. This is a very important book, and it was written by Ibn Rushd, who was from Cordoba, and he was born in the 12th century, in the first part of the 12th century, around 1125, 1126, around that time. I don't remember exactly. And he died just before the end of the 12th century. So he died at around 1195 or something similar. So it's a 12th century. But this is a century, 12th century, in which the Moravitun are defeated by the Almohads. And so, although technically Ibn Rushd lives during the time of the Muwahhidun, he's a Moravitun product. He's the result of the science and the culture that the Moravitun brought to Spain. So our Shaykh said he's ours. This is an important book because it deals with a matter that, if brought in its present form to the days of Ibn Rushd, he will be horrified. What has happened to the Muslims? And he would probably say something like, Al-Ghazali was right. This book is about a book previously written by Al-Ghazali called Tahafut al Falasifah. Tahafut means incoherence. So this is the incoherence of philosophy. And what he was, he wrote a big essay to deny philosophy altogether. This is of course the only philosophy that there is, because there is no other, and it's the philosophy of the Greeks. There's no Oriental philosophy. There are other ways of thinking of the East, but not philosophy. Philosophy is something invented by the Greeks, and it's a wrong way of thinking created by the Greeks. Although, ironically, now in the East, longing to have their own kind of intellectual awareness, as they see it, they want to claim to have their own philosophies. And so the argument is, you better don't have these type of philosophies, because they are wrong. But the status of the philosophy grew as science grew and the West grew, of course. So at the 12th century, the West doesn't know anything about the Greeks. The Christians had already buried any attempt to look into these matters, and they had no interest in the matter. So Greek philosophy had, at this point, died. It was just a thing of the past. In fact, the revival of that way of thinking and the adaptation of that way of thinking is the work of these few Moravitun thinkers, the most important of which is RUSHD. But there are others, and we will come to this. So the dispute is about the book of Ibn Rushd is to dispute the book of Al-Ghazali, denying philosophy. So he writes an answer, which is the incoherence of the incoherence, Tahafut al Tahafut. So this was a big thing. I mean, in today's it would be like a kind of television debate. Imagine the distances, the time, the books written, the slowness of matter, and yet still the argument persists. All the problem started with another man called Ibn Sina, and you are probably familiar with him. Also an Andalusi, and he had written a book that was very disturbing, praising the Greek philosophy. And according to most people, Avicenna had gone too far. So what Al-Ghazali writes is, in response to this book, that it was offensive to many, he writes a book basically denying Ibn Sina. So in the light of it, what Ibn Rushd does is to defend Ibn Sina. No, he doesn't do that. He also denies Ibn Sina, but saying he's gone too far. But he established the parameters in which philosophy can be accepted. And this is in fact a very modern subject, and utterly forgotten and ignored by our present intellectuals, and so common to us that it becomes part of our normal way of thinking. We are part of this process of thinking that affects fundamental matters of which we speak quite freely without much thinking, as for example, what is the truth? No? What makes fundamentally the truth? And we have in present society, because the collapse of language and the inability to language to relate to these higher things, then what we have done is adopt them tacitly, almost silently, without becoming aware of it. So if we say, for example, that the majority of the people are right, and therefore they can dictate what's right and wrong, when you elevate the matter to that stage, you are making an ontological statement. You are making a statement about the nature of things, about being, about the truth. And this way of relating to these issues, which is utterly kafir, is very much the product of philosophy. We have a language that allows us to make such statements without pulling our hairs. You know, because for us it will sound something. The majority of the people make what the truth is. And that, of course, in the eyes of any Muslim, would be horrified. The suggestion of it would be horrified. So the fact that we live in a legal system that is democratic, in other words, they can vote Riba is halal, and they've done it, and we accept therefore that is the truth, therefore the law, that in itself is kufr. Okay? Of course nobody thinks about it, and then you go and you vote, and then you say, but I'm only voting. But in the process of doing that, you're accepting a system that is completely kafir without any question, both in the eyes of Ibn Rushd and in the eyes of Ibn Sina, of Al-Ghazali. So let's go to the core of the argument. Let's try to understand it, because it has benefit for us. And it has benefit especially for most people today, that they, being educated in the West, and having passed through a normal education, even university education for many, they have undertaken this language, because this way of thinking merges into language, with a language that it is the present language that we have today, and allow us to speak quite freely about matters that they are quite horrifying, without feeling ourselves that we have abandoned Islam, or we have in any significant way altered our fundamental way of thinking, Tawheed, etc., etc., etc. And I almost explained to you what the argument is, because you can see that philosophy is dangerous. Why is dangerous? Come to Kuala Lumpur in the 21st century. And then Al-Ghazali will say, didn't I tell you? It has to be forbidden. And then Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, will say, the statements, either how Ibn Sina has gone too far, and we will define this thing of too far, is wrong, but there is, you can take benefit from this way of thinking if you understand its limits. So here it is, an utter denial, and on the other hand, in the understanding the limitations, essentially, of reason. And why is denying it, and the other was establishing the limitations? And quite naturally, I am closer to Ibn Rushd, and because I think his statements are more profound in understanding the limitations of reason rather than denying it. But on the other hand, if you have to look at what history has done, then you have to say Al-Ghazali was right. Now, without it is impossible for us to transfer ourselves to the minds of the 12th century, but the argument is easily understood. And this argument has almost was buried in the West. Certainly the Muslims never understood it. So they speak about Islamic philosophers, and of course Ibn Rushd comes in the first line, and he will be absolutely totally horrified of the title that he's a philosopher, when he said, no, I'm not a philosopher, I'm above philosophy. And so the argument has almost faded in the West, and in order to pick it up, we have to kind of go back a little backwards and try to assess these issues out of the historical content and into the very nature of Tawheed, and then we move from there. So it's a journey from Tasawwuf into the science or the way of thinking of philosophy. At the heart of this matter is the question of truth. And what is new with philosophy that never happened before is that a minor definition of truth is being given. And so one can speak with a kind of capital truth and low capital, low letter truth. But in terms of language, this difference doesn't exist. So what produces is a way of thinking in which the truth can be measured. So at the end, everything boils to the idea that we want to understand the world. Now, there's nothing more human than that. I mean, we try to do that all the time. Except if we do get carried away, if we do not understand our limitations, we may fool ourselves. So I often think of this family of ants I have in my kitchen, which I keep telling you about. I will introduce them to you. They're my pets, practically. I have got good fun. And but the idea that how they see my kitchen is when I see their behavior is quite hilarious. And obviously they have created certain patterns, and but massive failures to understand what is going on. And how many they drown in my glasses of water is just so ridiculous. They never get the point. One time after the other, they keep drowning. And although there is quite a few of them there, they keep doing it. Now, I can look at my ants and with a certain degree of contempt say, they don't understand. Well, human beings are not that great. Are not that great. As the idea that we can elaborate a science of the world as a whole, that is quite ridiculous. Never mind the idea that we cannot think about the world. It is also equally frightening. So, quite naturally, thinking of the world is not forbidden. You know, the ants have to still work out something every time. But they have to be able to comprehend their own limitation in order to learn more, in order to be aware of more. And this is where the critical matter lies, is the attempt of mankind to think about the world and how to succeed. Now, quite naturally, if you look at the world and you try to comprehend it, you are overwhelmed. Every observer with a telescope or a microscope, or in trying to understand the history of the past, of our present affairs, will be overwhelmed. The problem here lies on something much more subtle, which is, I'm going to win anyway, and then you cheat. And the cheating is to say that language, my representation of language, becomes the reality itself. So if my statement can be verified, then I say it's true. But the statement doesn't tell you anything about the truth, even though you may name it. So, before the reality, which I cannot comprehend, I create another layer of my own thoughts, of my own representation of things. And the verification of this, if I can verify this statement, then I can say this statement is true.